Thank you everyone so much for being here to this evening's Sowing Seeds of Hope Action for Climate Justice event. So this evening we're having a discussion on youth engagement and involvement in climate action from a global perspective. So thank you all so much for being here this evening, and for everyone viewing online and at home, thank you so much and welcome, and have a great viewing. And my name is Lucy, and I am the panel chair for this event. I'm a youth worker and I'm a researcher on intergenerational collaboration, and I'm a member of the Soccer Gakkai International UK Youth Division. And I really would love to dive straight into this evening because we have I think this is a very ambitious panel. Having a global perspective is something, there's just so many ideas and perspectives. So I really want to get stuck into it. So before I do, I would really love for each panelist to introduce themselves, name, country, and maybe why you're at COP26. So let's start with Aparna.
Yes, let's start with the native Glaswegian, I suppose. Hi, everyone. I'm Aparna, and I'm from Glasgow. I reside in Glasgow, and I'm also from India. I work with Interfaith Scotland. I'm the Youth Development Officer. And this last year has been Interfaith Scotland's Year of Climate Action. And I think I would be the first person to say I'm not a climate expert. I'm not. I don't think I have that enough knowledge yet, and but I want to keep learning, and I think that's what has gotten me involved in this particular venture of Interfaith Scotland, and I want to keep learning and want to do more to wash away the issues that are present in this world that are causing this sort of that are causing the climate crisis. So thank you, Lucy, for inviting me to be on this panel, and for the SDI for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, hi. Elicholo Kwemi here from Nigeria. I'm a climate and conservation activist from Nigeria. I work basically in the aspect of transitioning and repositioning agriculture to the front line of climate action. I basically work with local farmers in Nigeria and young people across Africa. So I'm in Glasgow at COP26 to represent the diversity of the voices that I work with. Currently, I work with young people across 33 countries in Africa. And local farmers in Nigeria, and like it is in African countries, who are largely marginalized in discussions that concerns them. I mean, the nexus between agriculture and climate change is very glaring, but then the need to ensure that the voices of these farmers and young people we are actually fighting for in the climate action space is represented in discussions where it matters. That's why I'm in COP26, to bring these voices of those that are not able to make it to Glasgow in person, to ensure that their perspective and ideas are heard. And that's why I'm here. And I'm so happy that Lucy has brought me to this amazing discussion as well. Thank you for having me.
Good evening. My name is Taluki Paul Mutuku, coming from Kenya, with Youth for Nature, which is an international youth-led organization that is mobilizing young people to lead on solutions to the climate and biodiversity crisis. And I'm also the founder and managing director at Kenya Environmental Action Network, whose picture you can see that right there. And I'll talk more about us. And the reason I'm in Glasgow tonight is really these 2 weeks, and also tonight is because I believe we need to center communities, we need to center youth, and we need to center the front lines when it comes to climate action. And it's because these are the same people who are actually implementing on the ground. And if we don't have their space at the negotiation table, or when it comes to financing, then we are losing the very end goal of what we want to achieve. So I'm here to ensure that my voice counts and that I advocate for the grassroots youth and indigenous communities to be at the center of decision making. And thank you so much for the platform. I look forward to tonight.
Before we go to this side, I've just noticed Gamed is with us. Gamed is coming in from Tanzania. So please, would you like to introduce yourself? And hopefully this works.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Lucy. Hi everyone. So my name is Ramid Abdul Basit from the United Republic of Tanzania. I'm an environmental activist and also a co-director for earthday.org in Africa. I work with colleagues, some of the colleagues in the panel as well, with Kaluki and his colleague as a youth ambassador for Youth for Nature as well in Africa. But also I'm a National Geographic explorer working on a citizen science project and raising awareness and building capacities to youngsters on the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, specifically to the CBD policies, meaning the Convention on Biological Diversity policies. Thanks so much. I had to be there at the COP, but caused delays of the visa issues, but definitely I think I'm there already, because if the voice is there, then I'm there already. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, Namaste. My name is Shreya and I'm from Nepal. I'm one of the UNICEF Youth Climate Change Champion of South Asia, and now I also work as one of the campaign coordinator in MOCOP 26. I'm here in COP26 in Glasgow through several hurdles and challenges to work, coordinate and influence the world leaders as possible. Otherwise, pressure world leaders to hold the goal to a track of 1.5 degrees, because Nepal, being a least developed country with immediate adaptive capacity, we're already suffering a lot, like with the 1.1 global average, and also to have ambitious commitments at loss and damage. I hope that is possible in COP26. Yes, I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much, Lucy, for inviting me, and I'm very much grateful to be among this panel. Yes, thank you.
Hi, everyone. First off, thank you so much for having me here, and I'm privileged to be on this panel tonight. My name is Vida, and I am the community coordinator at Force of Nature. Force of Nature is a youth nonprofit mobilizing mindsets for climate action. We find that mindset is often the most underutilized tool when it comes to the climate crisis. And at COP26, you may have seen, you may not have seen, but we are engaging in an activation called Call Your Mother. And Call Your Mother offers a safe space for everyone, whether you're a young person, whether you're a business leader, whether you're a decision maker, to come in and share your emotions, your sentiments, what you're feeling around the crisis, and as well, COP26 developments is a space for you to check in with yourself and to take care of yourself as well. And we hope that you'll do that throughout these 2 weeks, because it's very important that you check in on yourself and promote your own well-being within you.
I just want to say that Call Your Mother will actually be here. The event will be here on Friday. So if anybody wants to participate in that.
Awesome. So hi everyone, I'm Dulab Ashok. I'm representing an organization called Plant for Planet, and since there are plants, I feel right at home. So anyway, so as the name suggests, one goal is to make sure that everyone is planting trees. And that's why I am here at COP26 to meet with my other colleagues and to basically mobilize young people, especially children that are heavily underrepresented, and they have a fair chance to a future. And I also work with young people across the world, even in Pakistan. We work with young people, and we have worked with over 3,000 people in last couple of years. And I'm excited to be here and looking forward to the panel. And thank you again, Lucy, for inviting me to speak at it. Thank you.
It's really our pleasure. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to dive straight into the questions, if that's fine. So the first question to the panel this evening is related to youth activism. So there are many different methods of activism, many different motivations for activism, as well as many different goals of activism among the world's young people. The most well-known for us in this country is probably the school strike, so Fridays for Future. So speaking from your country's perspectives, what are the most common methods of climate environmental activism or initiatives which young people are involved in? And what are you and other young people in your country advocating for? I'm going to go to you, Eljuba, first for this question.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Yeah, I think to start with, I'd like to specify that the engagement of young people, initiative Voice Now, could be summarized into, say, basically three: the education aspect of it, the awareness aspect of it, and also mobilizing for behavioral change campaign. And that's some of the things that we have seen via the initiatives like Fridays for Future, and that's one to mention among many. And then but one that really doesn't get that much attention is what young people are actually doing on the ground. I mean, people are so eager to take out their cameras to take pictures of young people when they see them on the streets. But this is one way that we show our dissatisfaction of the current narrative of things. But then beyond this, young people are also doing amazing work on the ground. To talk of tree planting initiatives like Plant for the Planet, as it was mentioned, we have what we call plug-in, and which works to recycle plastics. I mean, combination of jogging and then picking waste, sorting it, and then the recyclable ones are further processed into something else while the plastics are repurposed or recycled or upcycled. So young people are actually leading on so many initiatives, and this is because of one thing. In the past, when the whole climate crisis started gaining attention, young people were afraid that the future we desire would this be possible, and that motivated us to want to act. And then we took it to the streets to say we are not satisfied with the current realities of things. But now, young people switched to acting on the ground because we started having hope that if we really commit to taking actions now, we can still change the narrative. And that's why when we take to the streets, we are not always saying to the government that come and do what we can do. I mean, what we are asking them to do is to come and join us, come and support us, and then back it up with policy to ensure that meaningful actions are actually done on the ground. So initiatives like school strike, Friday for Futures, among others, is actually to tell the government that we are ready to work with you. And by reason of our population, by reason of our technological competence, we are also connected to the grassroots. So we know where it hurts. We know how best to address the solution. So when we take to the streets, we're not just calling on them to listen to us, but also to work with us, because we have the solution. We are engaged at the grassroots level. We know where the solution is best needed, at the indigenous level, at the rural communities, in schools and everything. So the initiative that young people have been implementing is to call our political leaders, commit to urgent and deliberate actions, then work with us meaningfully, not just invite us to panels and all like that, just to have us there, but really listen to us. And that's what we have been looking to achieve with our initiative so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to bring this over to you now.
Sure thing. So my good colleague has said quite a bit. One thing like I see missing, especially when you're talking about Global South, is representation of young people, like children especially, like coming back to what I said earlier as well. So what we are doing within our organization is we are reaching out to young people, and we are trying to see, okay, what young people can do, like 8-year-old, 9-year-olds, so quite young. They are hearing this about global warming for quite some time now. What they really need to do is see what they can do, actually, what children can do for climate change. So what we have been doing is, and what basically what our mission is to make sure that they are also involved in the discussion, and what they can really do anywhere literally is to plant a tree. So this is a very simple method that also brings the conversation back to the children's code. Like, okay, this problem is here, and if they don't do something about it, they will feel that pressure that, okay, this is happening. They're all seeing the news. They all have mobile phones these days, right? They know what's happening, and so that's really important. That I believe this kind of basically mobilizing children is what's really needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, children, often when we speak about young people, are not really included in that. So
yeah.
Thank you. Kaluki, do you have any additions to this?
Well, I think all my colleagues have said almost everything, but just to emphasize something that I believe activism is a language of the oppressed. And we are oppressed, especially in the system of leadership that we find. And right now, the system is embedded on capitalism, right? There are times you have to be forced to do something just because there's a system of injustice that have been set from centuries and centuries. And so that's why you find young people are on the streets demanding for change. But the problem, I think, for me is that when you talk about activism, then we are labeling young people, you know, it's the only thing they can do. Whereas with our leaders, we are starting our initiatives from here, and many people in this room and online, we are leading with policy changes. And these are some of the ways that we can view activism. Back in Kenya, I give the example of my organization, Kenyan Environmental Action Network, where we are currently working with the Ministry of Environment and also partnered recently with the British Embassy to actually run and host a policy process ahead of Conference of Parties 26. And this is an important step of young people to reclaim power and bring back leadership. What we are demanding through these actions is that we are co-creators, we are co-leaders when it comes to the negotiation tables. So we are not begging for space to be in these spaces, but we are demanding that we be co-creators. And last one, I think I'll give an example of even farming. We are working on a project to establish community gardens called Bustani. It's a Swahili word for gardens back in Kenya. And basically what this does is that it helps to bring the community closer to restoration of what you stand to benefit by engaging on very simple activities with the soil that actually you can grow crops, right, and take care of them, then give you the food. And that is a very strong aspect of activism that I think leaders don't want to hear. They only want to see us in the streets, raising placards and always chanting about, oh, we want change, we want this. But this is just one aspect of what young people are doing. So I do hope that in what we are doing in these many organizations represented here, all leaders can see that young people are much more than activism when it comes to youth engagement in the spaces.
Thank you so much. So we spoke about activism and we touched on kind of policy and working with government representatives. So the next question, I guess, is in terms of, so the power to affect changes does not really lie with the young people. It's still kind of in the hands of policymakers, which you may not agree, you can also disagree with. So what can young people do about this situation, kind of the gap between real activism and decision-making power and policy changes? For this, I'm just going to bring in Gamit, if he's there, and would like to say something.
Yes, thanks, Lucy. So first of all, I also appreciate the previous speakers to the points that they have raised in terms of the work that we are actually doing in terms of moving forward with activism and not even turning back. So with what roles that can be done by the youngsters in terms of just being on the line to affect the policies, from my perspective, is actually maintaining the ambition. That's number one, because if on day one you plan to be a climate activist and decided to affect the policies, then number one is to just stay on your lane, stay with your ambition, because that's the most important thing. Because you had a reason to start. If the reason was to curb the fossil fuels and make some noise for the fossil fuels to stay on the ground, then that's the ambition and keep the goal going. But also how to affect policies to the senior policymakers from my end is to first constant learning, because learning how the policy process goes is also the most important thing for us youngsters to understand, because we might be raising our voices and be very passionate activists, but again, if you're not learning on how the process is going, then that's another case, because what's happening in COP26, so many of the youngsters might be activists, but again, they don't understand how the policies are getting processed, because they say policy itself is a process. If we demand change, then we need to understand how the change is being done. And now we are seeing so many of us youngsters at COP25, COP26, and the coming COPs, because we are now understanding the most important thing is just to be on the table and also to affect the policies that are actually being made on the table. So through lobbying and constant learning, that's the power of lobbying, which will actually increase our ambition to be or to really stay on the lane of affecting the policies. But again, constant learning, because the policies are so wide. Sometimes it's also very important to be very specific to your agenda in terms of maybe the nature of the problem affecting your local community, and on how you can straight away affect the policies that are actually maintaining the ambition. So that's my perspective on that end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Shreya, I'm going to come to you.
Hello, now? Am I getting a bit loud? Okay, thank you. Yeah, like I agree with Namit, and on adding that, yes, that young people don't have the direct power to influence the policy making process, but we do have that influence, indirect influence to participate in the policy making and also to influence the decisions. What happens most of the time is young people's opinions are just asked after setting the agenda, like when everything is finalized, and then they call, like especially the leaders, they call young people to have their ideas, to hear their ideas and suggestions, because the process is already in the phase of finalization. Their ideas and suggestions, they are not acknowledged, and it goes on hold. But we don't only want to be included in that, like in the finalization process, but also young people should be included from the beginning, like from where the plans begins, and not just while discussing the problems, but also while discussing the solutions, because young people are the leaders, and we know that. I shouldn't explain that. One of the best example is like back in 2020, what we did was we found that in the first NDC of Nepal, the NDC is the climate action plan of a country, which basically defines that what a country would do to mitigate its emission, and also because we have less emission and we are more vulnerable, it also defines like what kind of adaptation measures are we going to take to tackle the climate crisis, disasters and all. And what we found was in the first NDC of Nepal, Nepal didn't mention anything about youth, education, women, indigenous peoples and all, who are the crucial stakeholders to take action. And what we did was like, there were different options in front of us. Like we could have done strike, protest, pressurize them, different sort of things. But what we realized was there are reason-friendly activities. For example, strike doesn't work in Nepal. Like, we could do strike, we could collect peoples and be in the street, but our voice, it will not go hard, like that will be ignored. So we went straight to the Climate Change Management Division, which is the wing of Ministry of Forest and Environment, and it works directly on climate change. And we expressed our concerns. Of course, the way to get there, it was not easy. There were lots of phone calls, emails and all. But we went there and we asked that while they are doing the consultations of with different people, different civil society organizations, they should do a separate youth consultation so that young people's ideas and their suggestions, their hopes, it will come in that paper. And what the government said was they don't have that capacity, nor the funding to do that event. And we discussed in the team and we said that, okay, like we will do that event, we will do all the consultations, and the things that we will bring in our document, it will be inclusive. It will not just be focused in one reason, because we are talking about Nepalese youth. So we'll include all the reasons and include their voices. But what you should ensure is you should have, like, you should put those the things that we prepared in the policy, and they agreed. And like 2020, as you know, like it was full of chaos, like the virtual, like we should do a lot of virtual meetings. The internet connection, it was a bit hard, like it was not easy to collect all those voices, but we managed to include, like directly reach to around 1,000 young people and have their voices. And we made Nepalese young people's priorities to NDCs, and we submitted that to the government. And like not all of them, but few of them, of those things that we asked in the policy is now included in the second NDC, like which is a direct approach. And like they have now they have mentioned that young people will be included in the decision-making table and processes and all. And that is why, like this time, like Nepal government, they have included 3 young people, including me, in the official delegation team. So yes, that is how we did that thing. Like I just want to say that the way, like to influence the policy, like it's not straight and it is not easy to go. Like it's not a silver bullet thing, right? It will take time, and also we should identify what kind of things will work in our region. Because activism, like strike, protest and all, it doesn't works in all of the, especially in Asian countries, especially LDC's countries. So yes, yeah, thank you.
great example of what Gamit was just saying about just not giving up and being ambitious and just really go for it. So well done. Thank you so much. Dala, do you have anything that you want to add?
So, like I, being from Pakistan and being very close to Nepal, I can relate to what Shreya has been saying, because I've been working for many years now in climate change, and I've been constantly trying to reach out to our equivalent, like we have like Ministry of Climate Change. So trying to reach out with dialogue, multiple attempts did not work. But last year, fortunately, there was this creation of a overseeing body by a group of senators. So I was able to connect with them, and through them we have been able to work with the Ministry of Climate Change directly. So one thing is to keep on. It's a long, hard journey, especially if we are young people from Global South who does not have many connections. So yeah, it's a long journey. Be in for a long journey, and you will get there eventually. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything from the country's perspective?
Yes, I think for me, one thing I always encourage young people looking to influence policy is to not start at the top there. No, we have in Nigeria we have 3 levels of government. We have at the local level, we have at the state level, and then at the national level. What I've seen many young people want to do is to jump to that national level. So what I encourage is you start at the local level. Since this level of governance, they are in the know of what is happening at the grassroots level. So when you are talking with them, they are better able to relate to what you're saying. So if you are able to influence that level of policy at the local level, then they can take the message to the state level and then to the national level. But jumping the ladder to the national level can really be a challenge. But starting at the local level can work. One thing that we've done in that space, like I said, I work with local farmers as well as young people. So over the past 8 to 9 months, I've been working on this project in partnership with Nourish Scotland, with my organization, Youth for the Environment. And we're looking to see how the trust and partnership can be strengthened between local farmers and city representatives. And what we did was to create this platform that brought together both farmers and city representatives to collaborate and talk on how these stakeholders involved in food and farming can work together. Because what we've seen is local government making policies as well as taking interventions to local farmers. And in the long run, these policies and interventions does not deliver on set objectives. And that's because the voices of those concerned are not included in the discussion. So what we did was to create this platform that brought them all together. And of course, we didn't just do that. We met with them separately in their community, with the farmers in their communities, met with the government as well, make them understand why the voices of these farmers need to be included, because the interventions are for them, the policies they formulating are for them. But if they are not included, it won't deliver on set objectives. We cited examples of what has been done in the past, and they got to see that. And when we brought them all together, it was a productive discussion. I mean, that resulted in relationship building and then trust building as well. So these are some of the initiatives that we have employed in Nigeria that has worked for us.
Thank you so much. Aparna, I'm going to come to you as kind of from the faith community's perspective. And many faith organizations, institutions tend to be dominated by older generations. So how can we ensure that youth both have a voice and capacity to action?
So I'm just hearing laughter from the audience when the question came, as I think a lot of you said agreeing with the question, I suppose. So yes, coming from the faith. Is it mine? Is that okay? Yeah. Sorry. So coming from the perspective of just faith organizations, interfaith organizations, and everywhere, I suppose, like Lucy said, it's predominantly, at least the faces that you see are generally the older generations. And a lot of it, of course, I think many of the structured organizations generally have that issue. So what happens is, everybody says, okay, we have to get more young people and we want young people's participation, we want their point of view. And some organizations are really, really wonderful about it, as in, for example, my own temple here in Scotland, they actively did want young person's perspective, and they wanted young people involved in the decision-making process. And I was elected myself, and there was another young person as well on the board, and they genuinely do listen to us. Like, we feel heard in the organization when it comes to decision-making processes, and so they're sometimes hesitant about it, but they trust us at the end of the day to at least they give us the opportunity to bring out the ideas. But a lot of young people that I have come across, one of the complaints is sometimes we are just in the decision-making process as a checkbox. So they just want to say that I'm talking in general, nobody in particular, but it happens that a lot of young people feel that they're simply as to have the face of a young person or something like that, which happens not just with young people, I suppose, with women, and when they say diversity and everything. But the thing is, when you want young people on the board, make use of their ideas. Like, one of the problems that young people again face is that they become hesitant in the face of experience. Like, they sometimes feel intimidated by the experience of the older members in the organization. It may be completely unintentional on everybody's part, but that intimidation just happens sometimes, and they feel hesitant about bringing out their ideas. And when that hesitation comes, into your mind, then immediately you start doubting whether, should I actually bring this idea forward? Should I not? Maybe it may not work. So that sort of doubts start coming into place. And when it comes to local communities, I think the best way that you can make sure that the voices of young people are heard in your particular community is to make sure to encourage them to speak up in the first place. Your voice cannot be heard if you don't speak up. So one of the challenges that they face before trying to speak up is they're hesitant about it. So one of the approaches that I think worked well for me and a lot of interfaith organization, especially as in Interfaith Scotland, we've got young youth co-optees on the board, and they provide so much valuable input to the board, and they provide so much valuable input to the organization. And the way that is if they come up with an idea, encourage them to see it through a little bit. Like, doesn't matter if it's a failure or a success, let that not come into mind in the first place. Give them the opportunity to work on the idea, and then because experience is the teacher there. So they will figure out if they want to proceed with the idea or not. And once they start gaining the confidence, they also gain the experience of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And that's how you gain experience. You don't gain experience one day when you wake up in the morning. You've not gained your experience. It's through the process. So allowing young people to go through the process of making mistakes and learning from there. Unless you make mistakes, it's quite everybody says this, you can't learn without making mistakes. So allow people to make that mistake, and then young people will learn, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to keep the organization going, and they are the ones who are going to want to be taking the decisions in the future. So when you're there to help, I think this is where intergenerational connectivity comes into place, because you can guide them, but let them take that step forward, encourage them to start out on it and be a mentor. I think that's what experience should be, the mentor for them. It should not become that obstacle that is stopping them from voicing out their ideas.
Thank you so much. I think our discussion so far has highlighted that there is an issue of kind of generational divide or a lack of strong collaboration existing between generations. And obviously climate change is an issue which people of all ages care about. And there are many individuals, both youth and older, who want to do something to tackle the climate crisis. So, having intergenerational collaboration and strengthening those bonds are really important. So, Vida, sorry, you've been sitting there so patiently. So from your perspective, what do you think needs to be done about this, and how do we bring generations together for solidarity on climate action?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think something that has really become clear to me as I've spoken to individuals in our community from over 50 countries, as I've spoken to my friends, is that young people, we don't see ourselves continuing our passions all the time into the workspace because we're beholden to the systems that exist. And the systems that exist require us to survive. And to survive, we often need to go to work, right? And for a lot of people, that work means that they have to step away from their passion for the environment, or it means that they have to step away and isolate themselves from the feelings of overwhelm that they feel when it comes to the climate crisis. So what is important is to create these pathways in decision-making spaces, as my fellow panelists have all evoked. It's important to create these pathways in decision-making spaces for young people to be able to continue to explore their emotions around the climate crisis, their initiatives, their passions around the climate crisis, and engage in these conversations, right? It can't just be a one and done type of thing. It needs to continue on, and it needs to continue on throughout our lives, not just in our youth. It needs to continue on as we build a livelihood for ourselves as well. And in doing so, that creates the cycle where, you know, as we grow older, we'll look to our young people and say, hey, I know what you're feeling. I know that this is what you want to do and that this is something that truly is important to you. So I want you to be able to follow what you want to express and what you want to implement and what you want to try. Experience, I agree, is a very key thing. And so we, in building these pathways, whether that be in business, whether that be in policy, it makes that vicious cycle virtuous, right? And we want to begin building this virtuous cycle around decision-making, around, you know, a genuine, authentic, diverse representation of voices, and not a tokenistic representation of young people's voices that we often see today. And, you know, I think empathy is a huge part of that. I think nowadays we sometimes fall into the trap of, oh, you know, our generation has experienced and suffered so much compared to your generation. But what I ultimately believe is that we have all suffered trauma, but this trauma is all very different depending on who you are. But we all have to recognize that that trauma is what grounds us. It's what makes us who we are. And if we can understand that together across generations, we can ultimately come together and say, hey, you know, let's work on this. Let's come up with solutions together. Having a diversity of voices, diversity of experiences, diversity of perspectives, that ultimately is what will create solutions, create creative, novel solutions. I think something else that we see in a lot of these decision-making spaces with the lack of young people, with the lack of a diversity of experience and lived experiences, is this crisis in imagination. You know, we're stuck to the same people's voices, same people's perspectives and experiences, and that ultimately forges the same type of solutions and mindset that goes into these initiatives and plans of action. And so we really do need to place a value. I think we need to communicate to young people like us that we're here to listen, or you're here to listen. We're all here to listen. We're all here to speak to each other and really engage in thought-provoking and meaningful conversation, not just tokenistic, surface, superficial conversation that occurs at the end of a decision-making process, right? It has to be ongoing. And ultimately, if we can already create that pathway from the beginning and embed that systemically throughout the decision-making process, that is where we will see change occur. And that change is grounded and rooted in intergenerational exchange.
Thank you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How can we bridge intergenerational divides?
Thank you. And I think a lot has been said. I think one other thing is we need to also give young people the chance to be provocative. And being provocative doesn't mean being reactive, right? At times, we should question how systemic injustices have been happening, right? At times, who are the best people to answer this question? They are the older generations who actually lived through the change. And right now, I use the example of what I feel back at home when they tell me about how Kenya was green, and my land was all forested and biodiversity, but I can't see that, right? Sometimes I have to engage my grandparents to just learn how it was before I was born, right? And the fact that young people in this generation are the one generation that actually almost don't know what it means to be in a certain environment. So if we are to engage in this intergenerational engagement, then I feel like we need to allow young people that space to be a bit provocative, but to act with love, that we're not asking this because you're blaming you. We're asking this so that we can try to trace our path and try to create a better future. The other thing is, and this I'll speak about something that Youth for Nature is doing this weekend, is that in the bit of working to inform policy changes and processes. Right now, there's the whole talk around nature-based solutions, right? And how communities are to be centered around the implementation bit of it, and how we are to finance the decade of restoration. So Youth for Nature recognize that, or realize that after the IUCN nature-based solutions standard and the indicator that followed, there's really a strong message around young people, around communities, around grassroots. And so we wanted to see then how do we then start a process that will have young people included in this process. And so we've been working with the youth constituency to UNFCCC, Yongo, and Global Youth Biodiversity network to sort of like have global youth consultation around actually what would be a youth definition around nature-based solutions. Do we feel included? And if we were to talk about implementation, what local actions must we have? And so we do this with young people, and not faulting IUCN or any other global organization, but rather seeking to make these texts a bit more inclusive and diverse for young people and grassroots to feel that we belong and we have our voices counting in this particular text. So on Saturday, we are going to be launching this NPS statement at the Nature Pavilion in Blue Zone of COP26, and you're welcome from 3 p.m. to witness with us. I think what it means for young people to organize this. And you'll be surprised to note that we've been able to capture over 1,000 responses from all youth across the world, from all perspectives, religions, and backgrounds. And I think it speaks to how important it is to have diverse voices. The last thing I think is that we need to think about humanity. That I think I never want to be the person to say that my father, my grandfather messed up my environment, because I think we understand that it's the whole climate change, right? And it affects us differently. And that previous generations have been impacted in several ways, right? Maybe not more than we are impacted now, but they had their fair share of impacts, right? And so we need to listen to them. We need to hear their perspectives around how it was when they were young and what they were doing and how they've been able to engage in the climate and nature space, right? And therefore also try to use our energy as young people, our time and creativity to bring the knowledge with our time and then see how we can create a sustainable future forward. So having this kind of discussion, for me, I believe it's one of the simplest ways we can engage in intergenerational engagement to pave a perfect future for humanity.
I'll look out for your nature-based solutions statement and bring it to anyone who wants to read that. Please let me know and I'll make sure to connect you. Gamit, would you like to add any points on kind of bridging this intergenerational divide?
I'm quite sure the previous speakers said a lot about it. Just add on that, for example, in my local context case, it's basically sometimes the policies that are actually in place to put youngsters on the table have also been a challenge. For example, with the Tanzanian Youth Biodiversity Network that I'm working with, it took us like almost 3 years just to have a registration certificate for that organization. And it's been a very big challenge to be on the, I can say on the table or on the decision-making table, unless you have the criteria to join them on the table. So sometimes it's the policy. They do know that you actually work on the environment sector, a youngster with a very big team on the environment and very ambitious one, for example, but they are unable to let you in on the table because you don't have the criteria to join them in the discussions. So it was a very hard process in terms of processing that certificate, but we managed to do so, and we are now very lucky. I can say it's for the first time since the country has submitted its nationally determined contributions and the national climate adaptation strategy for the youngsters to be involved. All the documents that have been written by the Tanzanian government in terms of NDCs and the NB subs, for example, for the biodiversity strategies and climate action, there is no inclusion of youngsters. So finally, we're not having the documents that are actually having a youth organization within the documents. But again, if these policies are at least, you can say, fixed in terms that are actually empowering youngsters, it will be a very easier way for us to sort of sliding down to be able to be welcomed on the table easily and to bring our agendas on the table in a very clear way and a simple way. But on the other end, I think this was on the end of for the policymakers, but for we youngsters, it's also time to have an individual action, because individual action actually matters from behavioral change. But again, it's also a matter of us seeing the problems and seeing it as an opportunity to see on how, and we are able to learn from different sources. So if we understand how waste management practices are, how climate science is, what are the innovations available, or how can we do it? How can we convert a problem into an opportunity? Actually, it works, and we can be able to showcase our work in terms of climate action. And now our voices can be even louder because they'll be seeing what we're doing and also giving us platforms. And sometimes it also works that a youngster can be able to achieve more, I can say, or to get more into the global space than into the national space. I'm sure even my fellow panelists are also facing this challenge, because the government cannot know what you're doing, but the international space can know what you're doing. It's just because your innovation or your work you've been doing is actually highly connected to the global goals. But again, the country does that as well, but it doesn't wish to recognize your work, but as well as not keeping at the table. But sometimes you just have to make that kind of innovation to make the policymakers recognize you and to have on the table, and now to push all a collective agenda of your fellow youngsters, to represent them in terms of what are your wishes as youngsters, what are your wishes for the intergenerational equity agenda for the coming generations. And it will be very easier to have a policy in place for youngsters, and to be specific, a policy which is quite friendly for the future generation. So I believe youngsters have the power, and it's a matter of the policymakers filling up the gap. At the same time, we youngsters filling up the gap. And again, this gap might be a bit minimized to see on how we can do this ongoingly, empowering it on both ends. And at the end of time, maybe we are hoping for the best, only if we have a constant momentum of doing what we are doing, and just maintaining the ambition, as I said earlier. Thank you so much.
At how much we've been able to engage you in this conversation with technology. It blows my mind. Aparna, we have just one more question left, but I just want to give this question to you also, if you want to think about maybe on community level, how can we bridge this? How can we have stronger intergenerational collaborations?
I think my fellow panelists have elaborated a lot on that. And one of the things when coming down at a community level, I think one of the things that has to be paid attention to is the power dynamics, the balance of power in any of these decision-making groups between the young people and the older generation. Making sure that there's a healthy balance is really important, because otherwise, if it's skewed either way, I'm not saying just one way or the other, balance is very crucial in any of these scenarios, to make sure that there is no voice that is being left unheard, I think one of the, at a community level, that is one of the very small things that organizations could take, a very practical step, and I know that these have worked a lot in different faith organizations, is just having some sort of an external audit when it comes to just once a year, when some of these decision-making teams are sitting together, just having an external audit in terms of just having somebody present there to make sure that the process is being completely fair to everybody, and that every voice is being heard, keeps encourages everybody on the team to work together, I think, and also make sure that that nobody, young people's complaint again, as all of us have iterated multiple times, is the feeling of that they're not being heard. So providing a good a safe environment where the balance is maintained always is, I think, is a step in the right direction.
I think we'll go to the last question and then have some time for Q&As. So it's reported that young people experiencing high levels of anxiety and mental health issues related to the worries over climate crisis, and of course adults can be experiencing these as well. Shreya, I know this is something that you've personally experienced and you've managed to transform it amazingly into really a catalyst for action. So can you tell us a bit about how you've managed to do this?
Yeah, sure. Like when I talk with most of the young people, especially of the developed countries, what they say is they were inspired to work on climate change because like lots of people now are working in climate change and they have heard amazing stories of big people, for example, David Attenborough, Leonardo DiCaprio and all. But for me, it was entirely different. Like it was climate anxiety. Like I coincidentally joined my bachelor's in environment science. I was around 17 years old at that time. And at the very first day of my lecture in environment science, my professor, he talked about climate change. I was like, seriously, what are you talking about? I don't know that. Like, because I was in very prime age, like 17, 18. And I used to think like, I know everything. But when I hear about climate change, I was like, seriously, is this happening right now? Like he was telling about existential threat and sort of different things. And one of the example was like, that touched me was like, there is a village called Dey village in the Mustang region, which lies in upper Himalaya of Nepal. And the weather there, it is already, naturally also very extreme because it lies in the higher Himalayas. But now due to climate change, the weather has been so extreme and the agriculture production, there is like very least agriculture production, and that food, it can survive the family. And the main occupation is animal husbandry, like they keep sheep and all. And like now due to the climate change impacts and all, like the grasses there, like there are no grasses and like they can feed their animals. And so like the entire village, like there was a discussion like whether they should stay in the village or they should leave that, because it's their hometown, right? So it's the place that they have been living since generations, their ancestors has been living there. So like, and at the end what they decided was like only around 25 of them decided to live in the village, and around 90 families they decided to migrate from that area. So I can imagine like to leaving my home place due to the such impacts, right? So that really touched me. And like at the beginning I was very scared. Like I went through that feeling of like feeling utterly helpless. I felt that like they're just 10 more years, like we always say the target of 2030, like they're just 10 years to take action on climate change. So 10 years is a very short time, right? Like what we can do in this time, like I'm reading, I'm doing, and I have plans for my future, but we don't have anything after 2030. So that thing really scared me. But slowly and gradually what I realized was like everyone, like climate change doesn't differentiate anyone, like rich, poor, boy, girl, everyone, but it depends on our adaptive capacity and also like what kind of leadership actions that we're taking. So rather than being the victim of climate change, I decided to be a leader of climate change, and that's why I translated my climate anxiety to climate activism. And that is how like I'm working right now. So I think the best way to address climate, like if you ask most of the young people today, like they say like most of say like they are frightened because that is the case, right? And also even if we try to be hopeful, if we see the real scenario, like the study says that like even if we meet the NDC, the climate action targets of all the countries, which is way far, like the emissions, it will increase by around 17% by 2030. But like we have to reduce the emission by about 45%, but it will increase even if we achieve that. So the real thing, it is very scary, but also like being hopeful and trying to do things that, okay, like we can change that, it's not impossible, it is possible, and doing those things. So I think the best way to address climate anxiety is climate justice. And now it is the high time to face the truth, the betrayal of inaction, because government peoples, the business leaders, they like from the long time, they need that the use of fossil fuels and the system, this capitalism system and all, like it will cause climate crisis, but they choose economy, they choose profit over planet, they choose profit over people's health and all. Like now is the very high time to face the truth and to listen to the young people and to take urgent action on climate change. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Shreya. So Vida, your organization, Force of Nature, is a leading youth organization specifically addressing climate anxiety among young people. So can you tell us what can be done to support and empower young people who are currently experiencing, and tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. In order to understand how we can harness eco-anxiety, we must first understand where it comes from. Bottom line is that we're not suffering from eco-anxiety. It's not something that we are suffering from. It is something that we are feeling. And feeling eco-anxiety simply means that we are awake to what the problems are. And that's really powerful because that is ultimately what we can channel into taking action and into agency. Shreya, I totally understand where you're coming from with, the doomism and gloomism that's going around when it comes to the environment, the climate crisis. It's really tough. It's really tough to be hopeful, to remain optimistic. And all this doomism and gloomism creates, I think, two key stories that you subscribe to subconsciously when experiencing eco-anxiety that can paralyze you. And that's number one, I'm too small to make a difference. And number two, the system's too broken to change, right? And so in order to channel eco-anxiety into action, these two underlying narratives must be challenged. And so one way to do that, is to come together and say, okay, let's show that we can heal this system, right? The system's not too broken to be changed. Let's show that we can heal the system by engaging in disruptive action. And I think the word disruptive and disruption carries a lot of negative connotations, but really it's something that's positive. It should be embraced because it ultimately means change. We're existing in this narrative of crisis, like I said, doomism and gloomism. And we need to shift to a narrative of change, of embracing the discomfort that comes with change. And to do this, the first step is to have these conversations, to navigate your emotions around the climate crisis, to navigate your emotions around what's happening at COP. Right now we have all this news and it's saying that, COP26 is make it or break it. If we don't make it, it's a done deal where it'll be a failure. It will be framed as a failure by the media, by the policymakers. And it's important that we avoid that we try and circumvent that narrative of failure and engage in a discourse of hope, of optimism, right? Because action is being done. And if we have these conversations about, okay, this is what I'm feeling, but here's what I'm doing to address it, we're going to be able to come together as a team. And something else that's really important to remember is that the onus does not fall on you as the individual to solve the climate crisis. The onus falls on the collective, the society. Each individual part of society plays a role in the collective action and the collective result. So bottom line is, come together, let's have these conversations, let's address these difficult topics, and let's establish, again, going back to what I said earlier, let's establish some empathy, something that can ground us all together in a team effort towards achieving action. And so, like I said, we're not suffering from eco-anxiety. I think what we can all do as members of society, as members of a global community, is to come together and harness these emotions so that we can make something out of it and engage in a discourse of change rather than crisis.
That's such a powerful way to kind of end this part of the discussion, and just that message of hope. And I think all of your stories today are real messages of hope and, real taking action and examples of hope and why we should be hopeful and the power of deciding to be hopeful. So thank you all so much. And also Gambit's still there. Thank you so much too. We have probably about 15 minutes for Q&A. So does anybody have any questions for our panelists? Can't see anyone. We have at the front. Do we have a mic? Or be loud?
Shout loud. I'll shout. I'm Lydia Merrill from Manchester. And I work with on an intergenerational learning program. And I met yesterday with some 14-year-olds from a school near here. And one young man had suddenly made sense of the causes of the climate breakdown. And he was passionate about it. He suddenly had seen that something had to be done, and he was going to try and do it himself. But I said, what about your friends at school? And he said, oh, they're not interested. They don't care. I'll have to do it myself. So I know from the children that I've worked with in Manchester, that is the experience of a lot of the climate champions of sort of 8, 9, 10, 15 years old. And I'm wondering what you think we can do, you would want to do in your situation for children who say, I'm not interested.
So we have a question about kind of how do you engage those who say they're not interested for whatever reason that they have, especially young people, and kind of getting your friends more active and engaged in what you're doing. So is there anybody who'd really like to take this? Okay, we have
yeah, I can relate to that because like I have taught science and environment in a primary school for about 2 years, and like I have got that opportunity to directly engage with the young people. What happened was like the school, like they didn't used to do much work on environment, and so those sort of things. And what we decided was like, let's open a green club in the school, and we invited students to be a part of that. Like very few of them, they expressed their interest, and like most of them, they didn't express their interest. And I felt like it's not good to force them. But what we did was we keep on doing things. We kept on doing things, different things. Like we held rallies, we organized cleanliness programs, we even collected all the teachers and gave awareness sessions, and different kind of things. We even had the parents-students conversation, like having different pictures and the boards and all. So like after a few months, like the result was a bit good, and all the teachers, they were already appreciating the children who were in the eco club. So like by that example, like all the young people like who were not interested before, like they were very much interested, and like there was like almost all of the group from 6 to 10, like they were like, okay, I also want to be a part of that club. So I think the best way is to like not to force them. It's okay, like because like it depends on their choice, right? So it's not good to force them, but just taking time and showing them example, and not like okay, I'm showing you example, you should do like this, but not in a bit indirect way. I think that will work.
Okay. Thanks. I mean, I totally support what you have just said. I basically think it's about the language of communication. I mean, when you want to talk with someone who is age 10, 12, and the likes, I mean, someone who is not in the time is first for them to join. When we start speaking the number of tons of CO2 that we need to clear up, when we start using the big English, it gets them hope. It's like talking with even someone who is way older than themselves, speaking to someone who's a farmer, and then using a terminology you would use for someone who is an engineer in the energy sector. They won't want to listen to you. But when you are able to relate what they are passionate about and how the climate crisis is affecting it, they would want to listen to you, and they would want to also join the movement. So I think it's largely about the language of communication and finding that nexus between what matters to them and then the climate crisis and how it's affecting it.
Yeah, I'll add on to that, and I'll echo that as well. I think action I think comes from this process. It's not always linear, but there is a process of knowledge, empathy, and action. And I think that knowledge piece consists of different types of knowledge. And so I think there's knowing, simply knowing a yes or no. There's understanding that's going, under the surface and really understanding what it is, what the facts are, what the development of something is, and then finally there's experiencing. And so I think one great thing about young people is that our minds are very malleable. That's, young people, young minds are very malleable and take in a lot of information. So I definitely agree, tapping into their passions and what they're interested in and using language that resonates with them is a great way to bring, climate change into the conversation. And it doesn't always have to be, radicalized as in like, it can't be make or break. What I'm trying to say is, you don't have to be an activist or rather you don't have to be green all your life to be an activist. You can do little things to be an environmental activist. And so for young people, I think there's a lot of pressure as well to say that, oh, if I commit myself to this cause, if I commit myself to the environment, I have to be perfect. But you do not have to be perfect. If you set your mind to it, and if you understand what's happening around the world with the climate crisis, and even with what you're interested in, that is enough, right? Like I said, it's not an individual responsibility. The onus is on the collective. And so if we can place less pressure on the young mind and also tie, their concern for what their passions and interests are into this greater picture, then ultimately they'll be able to see this greater picture and we'll be able to have and facilitate more conversations around climate change, what it is, what it consists of, and also provide the action steps that they can take. Don't leave them hanging. I sometimes feel like that, especially in my classes. Like I said, we're living in a world where we have to reduce carbon emissions, but energy consumption is increasing. How is that supposed to happen, right? What am I supposed to do about it? What can the world do about it? There's no action steps that are left to us as young people after we've received this information. So it's great to, tap into their passions and interests, but also be sure to provide some sort of outlet for action so that they understand where they can go upon receiving that knowledge.
Do we have any other questions? We have a few hands up. You got first. Do you want to go?
Yes. My name is Elvin. I'm 21 and I live in Sweden, in Northern Europe. And Sweden is one of the richest countries on earth, and obviously we're also here in the UK. So my question is about if any of you young people from the Global South have thought about what, and I work with every day with building the climate movement in Sweden. So have any of you young people in the Global South thought about what would be useful in terms of how, like, things we can think about in the global north, in rich countries as we build our movements, what would be useful to young people in the global.
Thank you. Just to repeat, we've got a great question about how can those interested in climate movements in the global north support, or what can we do to help movements in the global south? Kaluki, do you want to go for this?
And thanks, Elvin. Wow, I'm happy that you didn't do and you have this great question. I think one thing is, number one, for our fellow activists from the global north is to recognize the kind of privilege that you have, that for most of us in Africa, Elidila will be my witness, or Agami, that at times we go to the streets, we don't have food, right? We don't have transport, at times we are volunteering in the movement. And so I don't think there's any way you can like equate me with, for instance, yourself from Greta, right? Who's from Europe, or privilege and all the financial resources, at times even having access to any media. So I think that point of understanding your privilege is very important. And then from that point, then the ball goes back to you, that actually you realize that there's a need for me to support somewhere in, someone in some African country or global south country. In which ways? Number one, I think then demanding that the media attention goes to the people in the global south. At times, I think you've seen how appropriating media houses are nowadays, that we come to conferences, and at times when myself or Ludilo, my friend here, goes to participate in any media interview, it's like we are just repeating someone's script. Why? Because this is someone from Global North with a Global North perspective trying to force me to say something to fit the status quo, right? So I think another challenge is now how Global North activists can actually try to push for the media fraternity in the Global North to also like let young activists from Africa or Global South countries to tell their stories if they are, because I think if we try to refine or dilute these stories, then we are losing the mark. And the climate crisis, they say, is affecting all of us, but it's affecting all of us differently. So that's another point, I think. The other one, most people don't talk about it, but financing is very important. That for us to sustain a movement and for us to attain the justice that we need from Global South, it's also to see how do we then fundraise and finance activists in Global South to ensure that, number one, the security is there, right? And it's assured that I don't have to go to the street fearing that a police is going to take me to custody on a Friday night and then put me locked there with adults until Monday, and you never know what's going to happen in between. That we have to finance to ensure that Global South activists have enough like litigation process to secure their issues if they have friction with the government, and also really to help us come up with campaigns that will bring this sort of support system for you from the Global South to really help me or work with me to really take the movement further. And finally, I think there's a bit of having dialogues and having spaces between Global North activists and Global South activists to just exchange the knowledge out of what we are doing in our different countries, and then being able to create ideas on how we can move forward, how we can inspire each other, and how we can sort of like have a bit of cross-pollinating of this amazing knowledge that you from Global North has and me from the Global South country, which are experiencing the effects of climate change, and how then we can weave together a better future through creating the solutions using storytelling as a medium. I think these are very important ones to consider.
Do you want to say something?
I believe Paul, my colleague here, has actually said the thing. And I'll just talk about what my organization and an organization in the UK is looking to do. We called it a Rhetoric project. It's actually an initiative that started out in there. And it's a form of that platform that allows for experience sharing. It's in the agriculture space. What we've come to understand is young people are not encouraged to go into agriculture, and because of course the income of the farmers is not reflective of their investments. And then we're looking to see how we can change this narrative to ensure that young people are motivated and encouraged. And what the project entails is a form of exchange, which one is going to be virtual, where young people in UK can tell young people in Nigeria about the best practices that they are employing to say that this will really motivate them to want to do more in the agriculture space. And like Paul mentioned about resources and financing and all like that, we've seen many organizations who, because of representation, I mean, young people in Nigeria are always passionate, in Africa, sorry, Global South, that we are passionate about engaging in something that matters to them, climate change for one, but resources to really implement these actions on the ground is a major challenge. And one thing about young people in the Global South is once they see that an organization has an international representation, there is this feeling that maybe there might be support for me to do more in my community, but then most times they end up joining this organization and not paying form of support to come to them. So in the long run, they relent if the support is not there. And that's one of the challenges why many young people in the Global South are getting discouraged in engaging in the movement, because the level of poverty is high. Young people want to eat, and when you tell someone who has not eaten to go to the street or to not even cut down the tree in the first instance, when that's the only source of income the person has, he won't listen to you. But when the resources is there for one to do what he or she is passionate about, taking to the street, implementing initiative on the ground, that would motivate them to want to do more. But when the resources is not there, and then them joining an international movement is just for the organization to say we have members in Africa when they are not being supported to implement initiative on the ground. That would discourage them. So the aspect of funding and financing is also as important as the aspect of creating a platform for exchange and exploration sharing among this region.
I just want to highlight just one thing. Today was like the finance day at COP as well. So it's really important to see how businesses can come in and support young people, because usually they are very near to people where they are basically working. So that kind of conversation needs to happen as well, not just okay, how we can get funding internationally, but nationally as well as locally, how we can build those connections, and because those people are interested and many of the businesses would be open to having those conversations. So, thank you.
I just want, because that's a really important point, I think, because we talk about youth tokenism, but also like tokenizing youth from the global south in particular. So having like starting a movement and saying, oh, we're a global movement just because we have the faces of, you know, some global south. We see it happening quite a lot. So yeah, it's about how can you meaningfully engage, not just young people, but anyone that you're working with. How can you're bringing them to the table for some reason. Again, it should be a one-way, two-way support. Shreya, as a youth from the global south, I want to hear you.
Yeah, like most of the things like my colleagues have said, like one important thing I think is like not taking space on behalf of us, like for example, on behalf of global south and all, like instead of that, like making that space open, like reserve the seat, but give us that platform to speak, not speak on behalf of us. First thing is that. And another one is like, we often say that often like when I hear the speech of, especially not all, but global north activists, like what we hear is like, we're speaking on behalf of voiceless people and all around, like those kind of narrative. I feel like we are not voiceless, the people in the global south. We of course have voice, we already have doing incredible works, but we are unheard, like we are not voiceless, but we are unheard. So I think like we should really change that narrative, like, and because of that also, like many of the media perspective also, they also narrate our stories in that way. Like when Vanessa was cropped out from that picture, like she was the one who first raised that issue, right? And yesterday also, like there was another interview and she was again cropped out of that issue. So I think if she will definitely speak on her behalf, like, but not all of the young people from global south, we have the courage to speak, right? And another thing, like if the people, like the young activists from the global north, for example, Sweden, England, UK, and all, like this region, like who is developed, who has the highest historical responsibility and also the present responsibility, and who also has the financial resources, right? Financial, not just financial, but technological capacity building, manpower, and all different things. Like I think the young people, they should also like pinpoint the mistakes that people are creating in terms of setting narratives. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your question. I hope that gave some clear points. I think we've spoken a lot about intergenerational collaboration, but how can we also strengthen intra-generational collaboration? So collaboration between the youth as a generation, because it's such a diverse group we're speaking about. So avoiding kind of creating one youth and respecting the diversity within that group. It feels a real pain point to have to end this discussion here, because I feel like we could just keep going, but I hope that there's some way that we can keep the discussion going. And thank you so much to Gamil for sticking with us, and all of the panelists here today. Amazing. Thank you for giving the time, and yeah, for being here in Glasgow and for overcoming all the challenges that you have to be here. Yeah, thank you so much. And to everyone who's been in the audience, and great questions, and everyone at home, thank you so much. We have some little gifts for you. Beanie, we just wanted to give you a little token of appreciation. And just while Beanie gets these, I just want to point out that there's a friend of mine in London who wanted to really contribute to COP26 but couldn't be here. And she's an incredible artist. Her name is Olivia Flenley. So she actually painted a picture just for the youth of this panel to kind of express her heart for you guys and also to all the youth that are here at COP26. So I have one of these for each of you, and it's been a lovely message from our SGI director, Robert Harrop. He's up there, and he's written a message. So you have a lot of support and a lot of love to all of you. So I hope that you feel that, and thank you so much. Yeah. Apparently. If you need us to ship, honestly, if you need them to ship us to you because luggage and stuff, then please let us know. But thank you so much. I hope I know some of you are staying in Edinburgh and may need to. Oh, Gamid, we haven't forgot you because I'm gonna post your package to you. So you'll have to give me your address. But thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
I hope you'll stick around for a bit. And that's the end of this panel. Thank you so much.
Did you file me? Did you file me? Yeah. Did you enjoy it?